Hey, good morning. It is the beginning of a new week, and wow, that last week just went super, super fast. So I am wanting to just sit here and do some sharing from my Jesus bubble with you this morning. Before I start in 20 minutes, see, I have a time limit this morning. In 20 minutes, I actually have one of my online group coaching sessions. It's for abuse recovery, and it's women only. And I actually have women from all over the world, multiple countries, as far away as Australia. And it's one of my favorite times. I have one on Saturday night, one on Saturday morning. We go through books together, 13 Weeks to Love, 13 Weeks to Peace, and it is just such a beautiful, growing experience and journey together. So, hey, if you love the Jesus Bubbles and you want to check it out, probably in October, I'll be starting new groups. Those go in 13-week cycles. Then I take a couple of weeks break, and then we do some more. So definitely check out the group coaching. I am going to put a link in my bio here on Instagram with the website link for my Live Wild group, which is where I post a lot of the updates and resources for things for people who kind of have first dips on that. So anyway, getting ready to do that in a few minutes. And good morning to you if you've just joined. We're in Isaiah 34 this morning in our Jesus bubble. So this is Isaiah 34 is really, honestly, it's a dismal chapter. It's horrifying. So we're going to kind of do 34, and then we're going to bleed over into 35 a little bit because we want to end on some hope this morning. But Isaiah 34 is a message for just all of these nations that have been together and have been getting these messages from God through Isaiah. And that's Egypt and Assyria and Edom and who else? I'm just looking back through here. There's been multiple ones to Egypt and Assyria, and then Samaria and Shebna and Tyre and Babylon and Ethiopia and Arabia and just all of these countries around Israel that were all involved in the cultural dynamics back then. So God says, come here and listen, O nations of the earth. This time he's not talking to just one, he's talking to everyone. Let the world and everything in it hear my words. For the Lord is enraged against the nations. His fury is against all their armies. And then it goes on. And then it goes on. He will completely destroy them, dooming them to slaughter. Their dead will be left unburied. The stench of rotting bodies will fill the land. The mountains will flow with their blood. The heavens will melt away and disappear like a rolled up scroll. The stars will fall from the sky like withered leaves from the grapevine or shriveled figs from a fig tree. And so it sounds horrifying, right? It sounds apocalyptic. Well, in a way it kind of is. This is describing these things, the heavens melting away and disappearing like a scroll, the stars falling from the sky. These all link with other prophecies that talk about the end of time and the destruction of planet Earth. So there's some figurative speech in here. And then it says, and when my sword has finished its work in the heavens, it will fall upon Edom, the nation I have marked for destruction. And the sword of the Lord is drenched with blood, and with all the fat of the rams prepared for sacrifice. The Lord will offer a sacrifice. And so it goes on with all of this figurative speech. And we could go into that very deeply and theologically if that was what we were doing in Jesus Bubble, but it's not. So I want to go down to verse 8 of Isaiah 34. For it is the day of the Lord's revenge, the year when Edom will be paid back for everything it did to Israel. This is about going back to the parenting heart of God. This is about God protecting his own, his people, and settling the justice score for those who have been cruel, who have been bullies, who have been taunting, who have been attacking, who have been doing all of these things to his children. It says the streams of Edom will be filled with burning pitch. The ground will be covered with fire. The judgment on Edom will never end. The smoke of its burning will rise forever. Now, is this literal? No. So when often the Bible talks about things like, oh, that hellfire is going to last forever and ever. The smoke will be ascending forever and ever. This is a figure of speech in the way that they spoke that says the consequences are eternal. This is an irreversible thing. It's going to be like this, and it's going to be so complete that it's done forever. The land will lie deserted from generation to generation. No one will live there anymore. And then there's something kind of interesting down in verses 14 and 15. I see it kind of as a promise, especially if you are someone who has not, someone who's single, someone who has not found that person that God wants you to be with, someone who's had your heart broken. If you go all the way down, I know this is switching tracks a little bit, but I'm pulling out the things we can apply to contemporary life. I'm not going through in a literal verse by verse. This is exactly like the language of what everything means. I'm pulling out things about the heart of God. So first of all, we have God showing that he cares deeply about the protection of his people and about justice when they have been mistreated. Second, complete track change. Verse 14, desert animals will mingle there with hyenas. Wild goats will bleat at each other among the ruins. This is apocalyptic. Like I said, it's just desolate. There, then the owl will make her nest and lay her eggs. She will hatch her young and cover them with her wings. Mothers will still be protecting and loving on their children. And the buzzards will come, because, hey, where else are they going to be when it's desolate? Each one with its mate. Search the book of the Lord and see what he will do. This is something very interesting here. Not one of these birds and animals will be missing. Were the birds and animals responsible for all of the sinfulness and wickedness and evil? No, they weren't. And none will lack a mate. For the Lord has promised this, and his spirit will make it all come true. And so I know this is a complete different topic, but there is something beautiful in this little buried promise here. Even the buzzards and the birds and the animals have mates. God created us for companionship. God created us for connectedness with other people. So I just want to just drop that little thing in here as we're reading Isaiah 34, that God has this promise that we are created for being together and connected in companionship. And if after all of the desolation and the apocalyptic disaster and all of the judgment, even the birds and animals will have their mates, that is something beautiful that is just kind of slipped and buried in, that can be a promise for you if your heart is alone. Now, it goes from there right into chapter 35, which is hope for restoration. And I love this chapter. I was just praying last night with a girlfriend through this chapter. It says, even the wilderness and the desert will be glad in those days. The wasteland will rejoice and blossom with spring crocuses. There will be an abundance of flowers and singing and joy. The deserts will become as green as the mountains of Lebanon. There the Lord will display his glory, the splendor of our God. So what is it talking about here? It's talking about after all that disaster, after all that desolation, after the apocalyptic wipeout, God will recreate. Now let's bring this into today's time. Whatever you've been through, if you have been through a disaster of your heart and your home, if you have been through a disaster at work, if you have experienced emotionally, mentally, physically, an apocalyptic wipeout, God brings restoration. He brings recreation, and he has promised to do so. He has promised rescue and restoration for those who trust in him. With this news, Isaiah 35, verse 3, with this news, strengthen those who have tired hands. Encourage those who have weak knees. Say to those with fearful hearts, is your heart fearful? This is what God says to you. Be strong and do not fear. For God is coming to destroy your enemies. He is coming to save you. And when he comes, he will open the eyes of the blind and unplug the ears of the deaf. The lame will leap like a deer. Those who cannot speak will sing for joy. Springs will gush forth in the wilderness. Streams will water the wasteland. If you jump down to verse 9, lions will not, actually, you know what? Nope, I'm going back to verse 8. A great road will go through that once deserted land. It will be named the what? The highway of holiness. Evil-minded people will never travel on it. It will only be for those who walk in God's ways. Fools will never walk there. Lions will not lurk along its course, nor any other ferocious beasts. There will be no other dangers. Only the redeemed will walk in it. Those who have been ransomed by the Lord will return. They will enter Jerusalem with singing, crowned with everlasting joy. Sorrow and mourning will disappear, and they will be filled with joy and gladness. It is absolutely beautiful, this picture of restoration that God promises to bring. A place, even if we are still here, this is not necessarily limited to after the apocalyptic destruction of the earth. This is what God is capable of doing in my heart, in your heart, right here on earth. Even though we may be surrounded by things that trigger our fear, trigger our doubt, trigger our anxiety, he can give us this peace. He can give us this contentment, knowing that he is coming to save us, that he will open the eyes of the blind who do not see the truth or who refuse to see the truth, that he will unplug the ears of the deaf, that those who have been ransomed by him will return because he can give us joy. So my challenge to you this morning in your Jesus bubble is to think about what God is doing in your life right now. How can you cling to promises of his restoration? What are the glimpses of his restoration after your apocalyptic wipeout? What's he doing? Write those down. If you can see little tiny things, write them down. Drop me a comment, send me a note, send me a message. And if you have been blessed by this morning, I would love it if you would just click share and pass it on to your friends with a note of why you like it. And that way, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or on Instagram, it doesn't really matter. Whatever your favorite platform is, just share it so that others can join in and have their own Jesus bubble too. I hope you have a really good Sunday, a great holiday weekend, and have a safe holiday weekend. And thank you so much for joining me in my Jesus bubble this morning.